And we are live. Welcome to part 2 of Breaking the Seal. We're super excited. So if you guys haven't watched part 1 yet, feel free to go back and watch part 1 at another time. But part 2 is super interesting. So Breaking the Seal is a project between Breaking Bourbon, Seelbach, and Penelope Bourbon, where we are, Breaking Bourbon and Seelbach, are blending and picking the first blended Penelope Bourbon single barrel is what we're calling it. So we're super excited. My name is Jordan Moskal. I'm one of the co-founders of Breaking Bourbon. I have my other 2 co-founders with me that I'll let them introduce themselves.
Yeah, so everybody, I'm Nick, one of the other Breaking Bourbon guys. So yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. Let you guys, let everybody go around the table here. And then I think we'll be drinking and talking about this project. So stay tuned. Eric, I think you're on mute.
You're on mute, Eric.
All right. Well, there we go. I don't know. I didn't even hit the mute button. All right. I'm Eric from Breaking Bourbon. I'm the other co-founder, and that's it for me. I already wasted my time.
It's the beard. It's because you shaved the beard down now. It's like that the mojo just went with it. You got to roll it back in.
Well, my blending skills are top notch still, so
we'll see. We'll see about that.
Blake, you want to introduce yourself and let everyone know a little bit about Seelbach?
Yep. So I'm Blake from Bourbonr and Seelbach. If you're unfamiliar, Seelbach, we focus on craft spirits, craft distillers and blenders. Big thing we go for is transparency. We love to see people who talk about what actually goes into the product and not just some crazy backstory about some moonshiner and their family, and then come to find out they got it from MGP. We love Penelope because they're very transparent about what they do, and they've just kind of pulled the curtain back on this whole process, let us be a part of it. So it's really fun. I'm excited. I'll be the first to admit I drank way too much doing these blends, but it was a lot of fun.
That's for sure.
Yeah, I think what I came up with, I think it's good. So I'm excited to see what everyone else thinks.
And Danny, Mike, why don't you guys introduce yourselves and let everyone at home know about Penelope Bourbon?
Sure, Mike Palladini, one of the owners of Penelope Bourbon. We started this, this crazy venture about 14 months ago. And, one of the things Danny and I kind of had always said that, we were going to be super transparent about our process, our supply chain, the partnership that we have with MGP, and kind of take it from there. And so we're based out of New Jersey. We sourced our Penelope from MGP in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. And then we partnered with Castle & Key in Frankfurt, Kentucky for our blending and bottling side of things. And so excited to be here.
Awesome. So what you guys may see me doing at home is I am blending my samples live. I know Nick, Eric, and Blake have done those off camera, so I'm a little slow to the game here. But so the whole point of what we're doing is last time in part 1, we had 6 different barrels to choose from. We had a rye bourbon, we had a rye or a wheat bourbon, and then we also had a 99% corn whiskey. And we had 2 of each type.
We went bourbon as well.
Say that again.
That one's
Sorry,
a bourbon.
That was a bourbon.
They're all bourbons.
They're all bourbon. The corn bourbon. So we went through each set of 2. We picked the winner of each round, right? So 1 rye, 1 wheat, 1 corn bourbon. And then we all went offline for a few days. And we kept tinkering and coming up with our best blends. And then we sent them into Danny and Mike. And now what we're going to do today is we recreated the blends. Now we're actually going to go through and taste each of the blends that we created. So super exciting, super interesting to do something like this. For those at home who've never blended bourbon, sounds a lot easier than it is to come up with stuff. A milliliter here, 10 milliliters there. It really changes the flavor profile depending on what you're working with. So Danny, how do you guys normally go about blending your bourbon yourself? Do you do the same thing we did? You sit down at your kitchen table, take the barrels that you're working with and just start blending until you hit that perfect ratio and then just upscale it to mass production?
Absolutely. I mean, we start at the micro level with kind of like what we're doing right now with the pipettes, and at a small scale just to kind of toy with what the right ratios are, right? And then one of the checks that we do is that as we scale it up, we we go from pipettes to liters, to multiple liters, and then, until you're dealing with thousands of gallons, right?
Yeah.
Just to make sure that along the way that the blend is stable, and then along the way you tweak it a little, just to get it the way you need it.
Awesome. So how do you guys want to go about and do this? Do you want to start and sample each one independently and then come back? I'm not sure if you've already sampled them. How would you guys tell me what you'd like to do?
I kind of tasted through them a little bit, but it's probably be best if we taste through them a little bit, and then maybe pick a sample to start talking about and working our way down from there.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't tasted any of them yet, so I'm excited. I blended them, and I've definitely nosed them. So I have these preconceptive thoughts in my head about what is what, but I know based on the mash bills that we're using that just because it noses a certain way, it will not usually taste the way it noses.
Which is interesting, and I'm sure, is there a way we can throw up, which, we'll put it in a post and everything, what our different blends were, but for those at home who are watching, to just give you an idea of what we're tasting. Let's see, 3A was that was the rye bourbon, correct?
That was the rye bourbon.
Okay. Yeah. And then 1B was the wheat, and 2B. So Nick's blend was 21% of the rye bourbon, 45, or I'm sorry, no, I have that wrong. It was 8.3% of the rye bourbon, 66% of the wheat bourbon, and 25% of the corn bourbon.
So we went heavy on the wheat.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, to kind of jump into it, Nick, what was the thinking? Were you thinking like, hey, I want more rye spice, less rye spice, and bring out some of the creaminess and or just, hey, I tasted these bourbons, these notes I knew I wanted more of, and
yeah, and you know what? I just that copied and pasted terribly into the YouTube thing here, but I'm dropping everything onto the YouTube chat so that people can see it here. At least, you know what I'll do? I'll put in at least the mash bills so that if you're on YouTube, you'll be able to see what these different mash bills are. So because it's kind of hard to keep coming back to that. But, my thinking was, when I went through this, I was pretty methodical. I had a very specific amount of each barrel left, and I kind of measured how much I had in mLs, and I said, how do I utilize the whole thing? And I was shooting for 30 ml samples in total. So that's about an ounce, which was enough for me to say that's enough that I can, come back to it. I got enough to get a good, nose on it. I got enough and I ended up with 6. I was able to get 6 samples out of what I had left out of those 3 barrels. And, so I used that methodology and said, all right, let me kind of vary it. And I went through and said, I'm going to make, one the kind of strong barrel, and then go down from there and then do a couple variations. And I also said as a constant, I'm going to do a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So I had my 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, but then I went strong. I gave each barrel kind of a chance to be the stronger barrel, so to speak, and then tapered down from the other 2. I didn't get to every single variation of doing that, but it was enough variation to kind of get that sense of what do you get when you go stronger with this barrel versus this barrel. And what I came up with actually surprised me quite a bit, because what I came up with, at least the one that was my favorite, I was hemming and hawing about a couple of them, but the one I came up with actually was not necessarily my favorite. The strong barrel wasn't necessarily my favorite barrel of the 3 we picked per se, but when I blended them together, I found that the characteristics of that, it really had some like buttery mouthfeel that it really came through really well. And then the other barrels complemented it. And so what I was finding was that kind of combination was giving it kind of the best of everything, where the blend, to me at least, was better than the barrels were individually. I'd say probably that 3A barrel was such a great barrel that I was trying to compete with that one, saying, how do I come up with a blend that's like equally as good, but obviously it's not going to taste the same. So that was my methodology for the whole thing.
So how many blends did you create, Nick, in the process of doing this?
I was able to get 6. So my full blend scope was 6 blends. And the most I used of any given one was 20 milliliters or 67%. That actually ended up being the one that I picked. Otherwise, I was going. I had another one with 20 for 1B, and then I was doing 15 ml as the stronger one for the other. In fact, 2 of you guys actually had one that was the same, and the other one was similar. I didn't do the exact blend, but I did something similar in my kind of blend methodology.
And Danny, do you have in front of you what was the final proof of Nick's blend?
I do.
116.8.
116.8, yeah. Mm-hmm. His final blend mash bill was 30% wheat, which was interesting.
Yeah.
And the corn came down to 65% of this blended mash. So the rye still comes through, I think.
The rye comes through, but that wheat adds a really nice just sweetness and gentleness to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting too. We've done blends in the past. You know, I would say more times than not, the wheat is always usually one of our favorites that kind of came through, like the 3A rye sample did this go around. The wheat's always kind of stood out as that, like, whoa, that one that really popped, which I thought was interesting with this one being rye. So
the wheat usually ends up being like our trimming mash bill. You know, we'll get in there with our initial blend. We may do a big transfer, but then like the minute, kind of finishing touches are usually done with our wheat mash bill. You know, where you add a little bit of it in just to give it that personal touch on it, that finishing touch.
So Danny, when you do a big blend and you're just doing those finishing touches, are you adding in, when you say a finishing touch, is that adding in a gallon or two at a time, or how much are you adding in to do that finishing quote unquote touch?
I don't know what the percentage is, but it's, say we're working with 3,000 gallons. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're getting down to the point where we're moving 10 gallons, 15 gallons. Okay. Just so even that little bit, kind of gives it that change that you're looking for. So that's why I was interested with this blend, because, it was dominant, I think.
Yeah, and so I think if I had a lot more volume, I probably would have, started with the dominant of each, figured out secondary, and I probably would have narrowed it down. You almost think of it like an upside down pyramid. It's like you kind of start big, and then you just start to get more narrow with those exact percentages, like you guys would do. Of course, you're a little limited with what you have, so I went more let me try each route rather than like minor variations of each one. I think some of what you guys were saying too, with the kind of plus or minus, because I'm using, we're using these little pieces of equipment, for example, but then on that much larger scale, I mean, I know, I wasn't not perfect with those pipettes, when I was trying to be as good as I could, but it's just not perfect, so I know it's probably going to vary even just slightly as we get into, the total blend itself. I mean, we'll be doing a much smaller blend than you guys would typically do, or than you would typically see a lot of times, being that it's only 3 barrels, but certainly a factor there that there's some little margin of error doing it on this smaller scale.
I actually think it's harder doing it on this scale, a lot harder. I mean, that's one of the first things when you're kind of narrowing it down to 3 barrels, you're more limited in your ability to fluctuate and adjust in real time.
Yep.
It's definitely more challenging.
So speaking of trying to fluctuate with different blends, Eric, you did a third for your blend. So what was your thought process going behind that?
So I did mine in multiple rounds. So round 1, I did 3. So I did less, volume than Nick did, per glass or per blend. So I was able to kind of squeak out a little bit more. So my first round, I did a very heavy the rye blend with equal amounts of 1B and 2B. And then I kind of flipped that, and I did a heavy amount of 1B and equal amounts of 2B and 3A. So kind of So one a little close to Nick's, and then one, completely opposite of that, because we kind of felt like 3 was such a powerful, bourbon versus barrel versus the other ones. And the wheat one was definitely really unique tasting too, and that came through with one of the ones in my first round. It was a little different. It made it unique. So in the second round, I kind of came off of what I learned from that one, and then did a bunch more. I'm looking at my charts here. And one of them, so that first round, I ended up not picking Nick's, but I picked the opposite. I did the 3A, I ended up putting a check next to. So in the second round, I did one that was just a third, and I did variations on all that again. I'm not going to get into this too much here, but the third was the one that kind of came out of that round. And then from there, I took those 2 into the final round, and then kind of filled in the gaps and played with a little bit more of 2B, and then kind of whittled it down from there. And then I kept coming back to the 1/3 blend. So that was what I ultimately picked.
Yeah, I use the 1/3 as a constant too, Eric. I was kind of comparing everything to that as well. So I thought that was interesting because and even one was corn, 99% corn, 1% malted barley. Then you got a wheat, I think 45% wheat, and then the rye. But the reality is we couldn't tell what was what when we tasted them before. We tasted them blind. No one could tell what was what. And they each had really different flavors. So each one brought not just a different flavor, but even a different mouthfeel and just experience at the table. So it definitely was a lot of variation as you moved away from that 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 kind of blend there.
So one of Jordan's Jordan's blend, now that I know him, was one of the ones that came into my third round too. But I haven't tasted Blake's yet. So
yeah, it's interesting just how with the third, it is very balanced, and there's a lot of nuance there, and maybe just because you have a good amount of all 3 different barrels in there, that I get a little bit of that corn sweetness, a little bit of that buttery note, but there is some nice spice, and I think it works. It works really well. Really, both blends have been really good and really different. You can just even on the nose, you get a little more graininess and a little more spice from number 2. So, it's just crazy to me how those little, we're talking milliliters that we're adding into it, just change things up.
Yep.
So,
and I would say Nick's is softer on the nose.
Definitely softer on the nose, and that spice really pops on yours, Eric. Well, especially compared to the wheat one that Nick had.
yeah.
Yeah, really good. Okay.
So Blake, how many different concoctions did you have to go through? How many different blends did you do when you were sampling yours?
I treated it almost like an infinity blend at first, a couple different times. So I'd start blending, and I kind of do that base of a third. I did that. And then I said, all right, well, what if I bump up this barrel? What comes through with that? So I started with bumping up. So I started a third, and then I started bumping up the wheat barrel. I actually didn't like that as much. I think just because the wheat was softer, a little more of like a little more funkiness of the corn, a little more graininess came through. So then I started bumping up the spice. So then I did it even, I did 2 parts, essentially 2 parts of the rye bourbon and 2 parts of the wheat bourbon to 1 part of the corn bourbon. And I was like, okay, kind of onto something. And ultimately I ended up going kind of a 3-2-1. So 3 parts of the rye bourbon, 2 parts of the wheat bourbon, and 1 part of the corn bourbon. And that's kind of where I settled in. But there was just a lot of tasting throughout that of like, all right, if I did 4 milliliters instead of 8, what would that taste like? And so then that wasn't where I wanted it. So then I'd have to bump everything back up to that same threshold of a third, and then start over again and just kind of keep working.
Blake, were you using the graduated cylinder and just keeping the math on what was there and then continually adding to it?
Up through that first one, and then I started weighing it on the second round because I have like a kitchen scale that works in grams. And so I just got the cylinder to like a base level of a third, and then I knew I could just pour some back into another glass and start blending from there. So who knows? Maybe I'm completely off and I pulled the wrong bottles, and we never know what. I was taking notes as I poured and added things in and kind of balanced everything out. So, but ultimately, I just, I love that 3A sample. Kind of wanted to highlight that, and so I thought about it like, all right, what do I love about the 3A? I love the spice and fruity notes. All right, so what if we took some of the butteriness and the softer, more like butterscotch from the corn barrel, added that in there as kind of like that base layer, kind of like that ground floor, and then we stack on top of that some more of the wheat notes, which it was softer, but still some really interesting things coming out of it. Some sweeter fruits, some darker cherry, that kind of stuff, and so I put that in there as kind of my next level, and then the majority of the blend was that high rye, which I thought that barrel was fantastic. So just really wanted to highlight that and kind of put some building blocks around it.
And this blend surprised me on the nose with it was actually soft on the nose more than I thought it would come off.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I like is something that starts a little soft, spikes through the mid palate, and then kind of lingers there for a little while.
This final mash balances the rye and the wheat well in the blend.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, it's also cast strength as well.
Mm-hmm.
4-year and 3-year cast strength. So if it's teetering on soft on the nose now, if you were to proof that down, say it was you're proofing it down to 100. That is even going to soften up exponentially more, not just on the nose, but on the palate. So, Danny, what was the proof on Blake's final blend?
Blake's blend was 116.6.
Nice. Were they all teetering around 116?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were.
Right around there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we looked at the original proofs we started with here, in fact, 3A was 16.6 on its own, but then 1B was 117 and 2B was 113.8. So that was kind of we were in that 113.8 to 117 range. And as soon as you start blending, you kind of really tighten that. And you were talking about the age too, I got to say, because we were talking about it last time a little bit, but you've had a lot of, 3-year-old MGP, 2-year-old MGP, there's a lot of 3-year-old out. Granted, these are 2 of them are 4 and one is, I think we said like 3.5 years old. Those younger notes that you sometimes get, like sometimes you get some of that like heavy pine, like some of these other flavors with those. Didn't get that from these barrels at all. And I've had 5-year-old barrels of MGP that had those kind of notes. They feel like they need a year or 2 more. But thankfully that wasn't, something we had. At least I wasn't thinking about for this. It was a lot more of just working with the flavors and the mouthfeel. The great part was each of the bourbons starting with had a really good backbone. So then it became a matter of just the qualities of each and trying to move the needle one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good point.
So what about you, Jordan?
So it's interesting. So I probably did 13 different blends or so. So I started doing, for those at home that didn't know, so we had these graduated cylinders, right? And then we had these pipettes, and we had 3 milliliter pipettes, right? And then we had 1 milliliter that you could really just narrow down to, however 0.2 increments if you wanted to. So I started doing, my blends to start were just like 6 to 8 milliliters, right? Just to get a taste and just to see if something hit me. right? And I could quickly eliminate a few things. And then as I started honing in on, okay, this is going how I like it, I started increasing the blend ratio of the bourbons used. So I started a third, a third, a third, which was fine. I actually liked it. I just, I thought there could be something better out there. So then I started doing exactly what Nick did. I did a ratio of 3-2-1, went through all the rounds, right? Then I did like a 3-1-1, a heavy like 6-1-1. And then as I started dialing it down, I realized, I really like the rye barrel a lot, but I liked it being complemented just enough by some of the other ones. So I ended up doing a ratio of 90% of the rye barrel with 5% of the corn bourbon, right? And 5% of the wheat bourbon. And that was just enough to still really pull that rye bourbon through, but also give it just enough slight deviation from the barrel itself to give it something a little extra special in my book, which I really enjoyed. But it made me appreciate the art of blending doing this, because it's hard. It can be really frustrating, right? Because you have a blend going that you think is going to go well, and then you let it sit for a minute, you start tasting it, and it just doesn't work out the way you want it to, right? So you taste each barrel individually, you're like, oh, I think I'm going to like this, right? I really like wheat bourbon. I'm going to blend it this way. It's going to turn out good. It doesn't turn out the way you want it to. And it took a while. It took a lot longer than I thought. I thought this was going to be an easy to do task. This was not something easy whatsoever. It was super fun. Fun it was. Easy it was not, right? So really, really interesting. And for mine, it did pull through. I really like that 3A barrel a lot. And by doing just a little bit of the corn, a little bit of the wheat, it just varied it just enough to make it even more interesting than it is on its own.
Yeah. So what was your final blend there, Jordan?
Mine was a 90% of the rye bourbon, and then 5% of the corn and 5% of the wheat.
90% of that 3A.
Yep. 90% of the 3A, and then 5% of each of the other two.
Post yours tier 2.
So that brings the blend mash up to about 19% of the rye, of a rye grain.
Yeah, it's interesting because on that, I think you kind of nailed it with the with your notes, Jordan. Of you just wanted to highlight what it did and or what that 3A barrel was, and there's like just enough to round everything out. But yeah, I mean, I think that's
still goes through a lot of the spice.
Really good options. Yeah. 4 really good options. I should include myself.
Okay. You can take it.
I mean, I didn't want to just go ahead and say, just go ahead and choose mine now. But,
and it's interesting because I think the approach Jordan and Nick took were almost opposites.
Right.
Jordan, you were looking to have that complement, really amplify 3A, like amplify it, but bring some character to it. Whereas Nick, you were looking at the rye as leveraging it as a flavor, like almost like the baseline, like a flavoring component, topping it off, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean that's ended up how it went. My approach to, I like thinking of Jordan's strategy, starting with those really small sips. I struggle with that. I really need to kind of go through and kind of batter. I mean, I poured the whole ounce of all 6 of them and kind of went up and down the line over about an hour's time. I eliminated 3, and then I pulled 3 forward and said, all right, now I got to get down from these 3 to 1. And the funny thing was each one I was tasting was so different from the last. And even tonight I poured just the barrel, straight, from each barrel. So I'm comparing the 3 barrels as they are, as I'm comparing to what we have here, and kind of doing just a back and forth. So that's helping me kind of identify what from these barrels is getting pulled into the blends to, remember what's been amplified, what that barrel had brought to the table, and then what the blends are bringing from those barrels to the table. So, yeah, it's interesting because we, anyone who doesn't realize this yet, we each did this on our own and didn't talk at all about what our strategy was going to be or what our blends were going to be, and then each came up with the one, and then sent it individually, privately to Mike and Danny. And interestingly, I was a little worried we were all going to come up with the same one and basically like tiny changes, and oddly, we've all come up with actually really different blends.
Very different,
Completely different.
You all kind of hit on all the different angles. I mean, high rye, more wheat, straight down the middle. And then there's one that's pretty balanced as well on the grain side.
It is funny because I had that thought of like, well, what if 3 of us come up with the same exact thing? But we did hit a pretty wide spectrum of blends. So I feel like every barrel got, I'm waiting for somebody to just throw out 90% of the corn mash and, 5% of the other 2. But I think that would be good as well. I don't know. So what are we thinking here? Doing like a vote? Or we want to try to talk through some of these, talk favorites? We want to.
I'd like to hear more thoughts on what your opinions are of each other.
Yeah. So for me, I have a front runner now, and I think it's maybe it's because it was kind of what I had in mind of highlighting barrel 3A, and so Jordan is my front runner right now. I think it just brings out a lot of the great qualities that I like in that. It's a delicious bourbon where there's brown sugar, there's all kinds of flavors, but then there's a good spice to it. And then I think the other barrels just kind of prop it up a little bit. So I'd say that's my front runner for now.
I'd say that's a good choice.
Not to say that I couldn't be swayed, but yeah, I kind of like that one now. But then, in the back of my head, I think like, well, we have a chance to do a blend with 3 different barrels. Are we selling ourselves short by only putting 5% of? But
it's a fair statement too. I went through a lot of that back and forth in my own head.
But that's the thing. At the end of the day, I think we're trying to pick the most delicious thing or the best thing we can. So
yeah,
I think the original idea when we were talking through this was let's try to find the best flavor. The best profile, and then go from there, right? I think that was the original idea.
Yeah. And even tasting Eric's again, it's just so rounded to me. It's not overly sweet, it's not overly spicy, it's not overly grainy. It's just, I think of it in my head. I think in charts of you got fruity, you've got sweet, you've got spice, you've got oaky. And it's just a perfect circle almost. And then coming back to Nick's, it's for like that nose is opened up and it's almost more like butterscotchy on the nose, which I do enjoy.
Yeah, see, Nick, I made yours last night after you had sent it. And I found myself just sitting there and I was watching like Gladiator at like 11:30 at night. And
Are you not entertained?
Yeah. I remember sitting down, I go, man, I was enjoying it. I was, and partly I didn't get to try everyone else's till I got them today, but maybe
that's how we should vote.
Yeah.
Gladiator style.
Duke it out with tigers afterwards. Right? Yeah, and I'll comment on that too. So. And I think across the board. So what's interesting is a typical single barrel pick. It's just, hey, these barrels, and it's whatever. Somebody sent us barrels. We're going to pick one. Now we've each we've already gone down a path a little bit. We've mixed something very probably similar to what the other things that we're tasting here is. We've come to our own conclusions, gone down our own paths. So now we're each in some ways vested in a barrel or a blend or a preconceived kind of notion, which is, add a different element, to the mix. But I mean, I think it comes down to each one of these, just like really each of the barrels. I think with the barrels, I think we all kind of agreed 3A as the standalone barrel was just this absolutely fantastic, unique barrel on its own. But now we've got the blends, and so now you're looking at the blends, and I'm looking at all these blends and saying each blend really brings something different to the table. So it's less about is one better than the other, and a little more about kind of just what do we want to make it. And I think that talking it through, like mine, for example, is that blend. It's a really kind of like an easy sipper. It's got that nice creamy mouth feel. It's one of those bourbons you're going to drink, and next thing you know, you're like, oh, I drank a lot of that. I didn't realize I drank so much of that. I kept pouring it, kept drinking it, whereas when you lean towards in the backbone of that 3A barrel, it's a lot more of a, like you think of what you get from like George T. Stagg. It's like you're not just going to drink it and not really notice it. You're not just going to, sip it easily like that. It's really got that kind of like that pop and the flavor just hits you hard with the 3A barrel. So we've got a lot of variation there, so do we want to go really heavy with that kind of 3A side? Do we want to pull it back, to some extent? So you're pulling it back, a little bit with like your blend, Blake, you're pulling it back even farther with Eric's blend, and then you're pulling back to something even more completely different than mine. So it kind of comes down to what do we want to do with the blend ultimately, as to what type of a blend do we want this to be, the end product.
Glad I'm not deciding.
Yeah.
Well, you guys realize we're gonna make y'all pick.
Well, I was just thinking that, Danny. No, we're in Switzerland. We stay neutral.
There you go. So, Eric, when you taste all four of these, what one or two really jumps to the forefront for you?
It's tough because yours is the spiciest and most kind of gut hitting, and then it really does, as Nick was just saying, it goes down to Blake's, to mine, to Nick's. So, and I think Nick's is just being a little different flavor profile than the other three. It stands out differently a little bit more, and I see myself leaning towards the other three a little bit more. I'm just struggling with, do we want the gut punch from yours, Jordan, from the heavy rye? Blake's, I really do enjoy Blake's. And I feel like mine's boring, but then I go back to it, and then it's like, all right, I like what I'm getting from each of the mash bills. So I'm still a little struggling which one. I don't really quite have a front runner just yet.
So what was your spice order?
Mine? Oh, the spice order. I had Jordan's as the 90% 3A, Blake's, mine, and Nick's.
So that's interesting.
I think it had so much to do with how much 3A was used in the blend. It's the most overpowering agent out of all of them.
Yep. So it's
what about the nose on all of them? What was each other's favorite?
I think I like Blake's the best.
There we go. I thought this was a job interview. I didn't know we were actually getting this barrel. I thought, Mike was just going to send me a letter afterwards and say,
Authenticity.
Yeah, master taster is now.
And so what, we get to keep whatever's left over from 3A though, right?
Tomorrow.
I think everybody's emailed separately about that.
Yeah, it was already. Depending, we'll single barrel it for y'all for whatever you don't.
I was wondering why Nick didn't use much of 3A. He was just mistake on it.
Totally.
So I think when I go through all four of these, no offense, Eric, I started with your blend too. So the third is fine. It's just towing the line, right? It doesn't do much for me. It's just plain and straight. I like Blake's, but for me, it's what the two that pop, and probably a little biased in mine because I went through so many, but it's definitely my blend, but also Nick's blend, which is almost a tale of two cities. So Nick's, and I like wheated bourbons. I'll be the first to admit that, right? So Nick's is creamier, a little easier sipping. But I think what keeps drawing me back to the high rye blend with the other two is 3A by itself is a great barrel, right? And I think adding just a little bit of each one enhances even more. And when I think of doing a single barrel, but also a blend of barrels, it's kind of the best of both worlds because you're still getting a great single barrel, but you're also getting to toy with it just a little bit to add in a little bit more blend, which makes it's as Nick said, it's not something you're going to sit down and you're going to plow through, right? It's something that's going to be a little bit more interesting that you're going to have, one glass at a time, and it's going to be more nuanced, and you're going to think of it. Versus Nick's, I could probably plow through this pretty quick, right, and keep drinking it. But when I go for a single barrel, sometimes I want that differentiating factor to pop at me, and then when I go for a single barrel blend like this, I want to be really nuanced to see if I can pick out. All right, I know this is a high rye bourbon, but then the other traits of the other two barrels, what's really pulling forward?
So Jordan, that is a good point that you brought up about Jordan or about your blend. If you compare it to 3A next to it, there's just a little bit of nuance from the 45% wheat and the corn, but it's dramatically different.
Yep.
And enhancing, as you said.
Yep.
And that speaks to the subtlety of these blends. I mean, we're talking a milliliter, you know,
That's all it
Like
takes.
less than 5%.
and you get some you get a different flavor profile. I mean, it's in the same realm, but there's those nuances which I think are unique. And when I saw Jordan, when I saw you send over your blend, I kind of thought very something similar to what you had said about, yes, you know, there's the component of picking the single barrel, but doing the blend. And, you know, there's something really interesting to be said about that, where you're kind of combining both of those experiences into a bottle. So that was a really good point.
Yeah, and you know, when I did this high 3A blend, what I started off was once I figured out, all right, I really like 3A as the base component. The more I get to it, it was really figuring out that variation. So I did a lot of blends around that until I started ramping up and saying, all right, it's actually just a little bit of each one that I like, plus the 3A that makes it. Which, you know, that in itself was a fun experience to figure out, all right, here's what my palate's really digging. Now let's fine tune it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of just thinking and putting two and two together, but you know, it shows you how powerful the wheat component is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was just thinking back what I was saying earlier about how we usually trim our blend with the wheat at the minute level. It's because, I mean, this just proves that the wheat is that influential.
Yep, doesn't take much.
It's actually, I'm going back and forth. It is amazing how different the 90% is than the 100%. It's a very different.
No, you're picking up those new. I mean, for sure.
Very, very different bourbon.
You need a lot more.
Small change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I mean, and what I think is interesting is, you know, we kind of started this experiment kind of going off of the kind of core Penelope blend. And I think for me, at least personally, knowing our flavor profile, it's completely, I've seen 4 totally different flavors from 4 different blends. And, you know, we're still in a microcosm looking at kind of 3 mash bills that we use. Now, you imagine you start bringing in a bourbon mash from a different distillery or from a different area. I mean, or start, you know, incorporating a cast finish. I mean, the endless possibilities for building off of that are pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Jordan, did you try anything with a higher amount of 3A, or was that the highest amount of 3A that you went to?
I mean, anything more was really 100% 3A at that point, right? So this was
your highest amount of 3A.
100% 3A was 3A, tasting 3A by itself, and then just toning it down just a little bit. And I wanted to do, you know, when I did my various blends, right, every time I had a higher 1B or 2B, it just didn't do it for my palate. But when they were equal in the same amounts, it kind of worked for me, right? And then when I cranked up 3A, it really worked really well for me. So that's really where I honed in that 5.590 mash bill, right, or barrel ratio of those 3.
Percentage.
Yep, percentage.
Yeah, I think we have a tough choice. And you know, I just keep going back to what do I like most. Obviously, I like my blend a lot, and I will never admit that I'm not the best at anything. So, but no, I find myself going back to Jordan's pour. And I think it is cool, you know, to say this was a private blend and we amplified a barrel picking experience. I think it plays in nicely with that. It also is probably my favorite. If I did a blind taste testing, I'm pretty sure I would select that one. So I don't know. What do you think? A vote? A blind vote? We text Mike and Danny our favorite results, so nobody.
We got an even number of people though here, so.
Well, I'll tell you what. Is there one that we can eliminate? Really, is there a barrel we can eliminate really quick?
No, I mean, just reading the room. I mean, I think I gotta agree that 3A is a fantastic barrel. When I did my own blends, I didn't do, you know, I look back at the backbone of 3A. The highest I went on that backbone was, let's see, what did I do? I did a 50%. So I didn't go above 50% on a 3A backbone for any of my blends. But obviously 3A as a barrel in and of itself is fantastic. You know, so if what we're going for is that like that robust, we want to highlight what 3A is bringing to the table, then without question, I think that high percentage of 3A is where you want to be. And the reality is it is quite a bit different from the 3A barrel in and of itself. It's amazing how much just 10% of something else, and it's 5% of each of those other two.
Yep.
It's amazing how much those, you know, dial in different notes that you don't get. So as powerful as 3A is, that addition of those other little things really does make a tremendous difference. So if that's what we're going for, you know, I think that's the one that I say we pick. Eric, what do you think?
Yeah, for me, it's between Jordan's and Blake's. I mean, I love mine, but of course, but yeah. I don't know. So I just tasted 3A by itself.
Yeah.
And I feel like Jordan's is even more intense than the 3A. Is it just me?
Is that a good thing in your book or a bad thing?
Oh, I don't know. I'm just saying. Like it feels like that adding that extra intensified it somehow. And you don't get that quite as much as with Blake's, but you still get the 3A. You could definitely, 3A definitely there. It's 50%.
Actually, did we?
I'm getting a little more intensity on the 3A barrel in and of itself. I'm getting the blend gives it some roundness to it. The barrel in and of itself is a little more robust, more rough edges.
So I had done one that was very close to what Jordan did during my testing, and I circled it too. So, I mean, it's definitely, it was one of my finalists, and I just ended up picking the more even, third.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm probably biased because this is the one that I created, but at the same time, I did do a ton of combinations. And to me, like I said, this is what, in my book, a blend, or at least in my mind, a blended single barrel experiment like this consists of, right? You find the best barrel, and then how can you enhance it even better, right? So you still, that core of 3A, that really good single barrel is still there, but you also get to enhance it a little bit. So I don't know, to me, this is the 95.5 is the winner. And yeah, as Jamie said, so how are the initial included barrels chosen? We'll talk about that. And as Corey said, we're probably splitting hairs. Yeah, you're right, Corey. So Jamie, part one of this experiment was going through, and we did, the 2 corn barrels against the 2 corn bourbons against each other, 2 rye bourbons against each other, and the 2 wheat whiskeys against each other. And Danny and Mike were the initial ones who pulled these 6 barrels for us. So yeah, if I have to throw my vote out, I'm going to throw out the 95.5 ratio blend.
Why don't we do elimination?
Ooh, okay.
What if we eliminate one at a time?
Okay. Well, Nick, I hate to put somebody on the chopping block, but if I had to, I love the other qualities. So
yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I certainly, I like the 3A myself. I mean, I like that backbone. No question. If that's the, direction of that backbone we want to go with. Part of my issue was with volume of 3A. I didn't have enough to put it heavily into one of my tests. And so that's why the heaviest I put in was at 50%. So I didn't even test anything that was above 50% on the 3A. And what I did find when I went down to that 50%, like I was thinking, okay, I'll go down to the 50% and that's going to be, I'm still going to kind of have it in that. But unfortunately, what I found with that was that just wasn't as good as 3A. So I got into this little, this kind of circle of just, well, why blend stuff in and make what's a great barrel worse, and so that's when I kind of got away from, all right, I'm going to use 3A as the backbone and got more into, all right, so we're now kind of getting into these other, using these other barrels as the backbone and using 3A more as the flavoring barrel. Mm-hmm. So that's perfectly fine with me. The other thing is too, the direction we want to go with, if we want that bigger, that kind of like spice pop, that big flavor from 3A. Mine is not that. Mine is the one you're gonna. It's the easy sipper. So I get it.
Yeah, the 3A is tasty.
And honestly, I would say we get it down to the two heavy, heavy 3As. So are we going with, and I think these follow a pretty even trajectory. I think it goes from Jordan's, the heaviest 3A, to Blake's, to Eric's, to mine. So I think if we're saying 3A is where we want this strength to be, then we're saying let's look at the two, probably the two heaviest. I mean, I do think there's I like the mix of just the 3, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. But I think at the same time, I think when you move the needle, whether it's moving it towards 3A, like Jordan and Blake presented here, or moving it away from 3A into something else, I think you start to get into, you almost want to highlight something and get some strengths from one of the barrels out of it, where I think that 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 doesn't, quite do that as well. So I think we're down to how much that 3A do we want it to be, but we do want it to be, say, at least what you have, Blake, at 50%.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so I think that sounds like Nick, Eric, we're showing your blends the exit door for time's sake.
In the kindest way possible.
In the kindest way possible.
I will remind you, but that the combination with mine was the blend plus the remaining single barrel of 3A. So just keep that in mind.
That's right.
Just in the back of your head.
Nick, yours is called the Gladiator blend, so it's okay. It'll always.
Yep, exactly.
That could be a good name for this, a little nickname for this.
There you go.
So Bradley brings up a good, I don't want to sell my barrel anymore because, but he has a good point of, hey, with Blake's blend, do we get more out of the blend? Do we get more bottles available? And
yeah,
I'd have to say, yeah, we would. So
you do, but you're not getting the best blend.
I don't know. That's still up for debate whether or not we're getting the best blend. I mean, we're still tasting here. No,
this is why we can't know who blended what, because then
yeah, we should.
Yeah, next time totally blind.
Danny's like, if y'all add one more layer of complexity or samples that
you want to go one more layer? Let's cut it.
Yeah, now we're even going even more.
Let's see.
Yeah, we left cutting it behind years ago.
Right? I mean, that's what's crazy. You go another level after this where you start cutting it and, something tastes totally different at like 101 compared to like 96 proof, or just cast strength is like where it's at, it's like the endless amount of options here.
I'm sure those who watch the Bourbon Community Roundtable have heard me, Nick, or Blake say the story many times, but the three of us were at Buffalo Trace doing a single barrel pick, and there was this single barrel Buffalo Trace at barrel proof that was fantastic.
We were ready to steal the barrel.
And it was just great. And they proofed that down, and we did a blind, and I think I came in dead last. Right?
Oh, it was terrible.
All of us got
it was terrible. Proof down.
Oh, it was awful. So, but it was a really good lesson.
Everyone's like, who let this barrel in?
Yeah. But it was a really good lesson that proofing makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, though, go ahead, Blake.
That was one of the biggest, like the most difference I've ever seen with proofing down. Like you always see some difference. I get it, but we were just like, what in the world? Like, did she switch those samples up? Did she like run the glass through the dirt? Did she?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I mean, because normally you think it maybe it would open it up, but not going dead last. I mean, and it's even funny too now, right now, Danny, we're really just, we're not even sure we're doing it, but we're just experimenting with different cast finishes. So then you've got different batches, you've got different proofs, and then you start adding in like these Oloroso sherry casts or PX sherry or cognac.
Right.
And it's more just us testing them and seeing. I mean, what it does, it just takes it in so many different directions. It's unbelievable.
It's endless. It really is. Like a 20-day finish on something or a 60-day finish. One might taste better at 30 or 60 or 30, and then you start cutting it down, and then what you thought wasn't true because it's just there's so many options.
You know what? I think
we
that's
just have shelves and shelves of samples.
I think that's interesting too. I know, Danny sent me some photos of kind of his, his home lab, so to speak, and talking about it right now.
My one counter.
It's all you need though.
All I get.
But I think it's what's interesting when you think about, you guys, what started, was it 2018 when you started this company? So you guys, like, everything you're doing, you're putting your heart and soul into. You're probably overthinking it. Danny, engineering background, I know you're overthinking it. So you got that component, but that's the reality of like some of these more historical brands. It's just dump those 400 barrels. We tasted, 1 out of every 20. We're good, we're good to go. We had the intern, in doing it. It's kind of like, because you guys are in that phase now of putting everything into this. It's cool to see that. And I think that's what happens sometimes is these bigger brands, not to say they don't have a fantastic process and they're not good at what they do, but they almost lose that passion. It really becomes just a job. It's just, you're going in, 5 days a week, you're doing these massive, blends of barrels. And at the end of the day, you're just trying to hit that same flavor profile. Whereas you guys are exploring, pushing the boundaries of where things can be. What was that one wine finish you were talking about the other day, Mike? What was that?
On a French oak, wine release for this summer. And we don't even know how it's going to taste. So we're experimenting, and I think we think it will taste great. And but I think part of it is that we really genuinely enjoy doing this. I think we're open and we're transparent about our backgrounds, where we came from. Look, I should be taking notes during some of this stuff you guys are doing. And I think I just think it's at the end of the day, I think it's nice not to take things too seriously. We're in the bourbon industry, and enjoy it and have fun with it.
Yeah.
Nick, that's what I was saying. Why the lab or the lab is in my kitchen, because I think you have to breathe it every day. And like I was saying, there's so many endless possibilities of combinations and this and that it needs to be where I'm walking by every day, that you could tinker, play. Like, it can't be at our warehouse. It can't be at our offices. Like, it can't be in my basement even, or in the garage. Like, it's got to be in a location that it's somewhere where you're walking by every day and multiple times a day. And you stop and you just like, you cut something and you nose it and you're like, oh, okay. And good. Over there. Yeah. Like,
that's in his kitchen.
Right. Like, you open my fridge and there's a bunch of soaked chips, that are just different, types of, different types of oaks, different types of, grapes, or even different types of spirits, just soaked in chips. So, like, just to get an idea of like where we're going, and we're trying to think of everything.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
All right, so as we come up on the hour, how about we do this, and we can all just do it at the same time. So we'll do a vote for the four of us, right? If you want Blake's barrel, hold up one finger. If you want Jordan's barrel, hold up two. We'll just do it on the count of three. That's it. No changing your vote. That's it.
And if you put up the middle finger for my barrel, I'm really gonna be upset with all of y'all.
Well, before we do that, so we got it down to Jordan's blend, which is a 90% of 3A, and Blake's blend, which is a 50% of 3A.
Yep.
Right. So, and then the other two flavoring components, Jordan has an even 50-50, and Blake went a little heavier, double on one than the other, but still basically that blend.
And then 1 part corn. Yep.
Okay. Yep. Heavier on the wheat. I will add, as I'm just got it down to these two now, I will say I'm getting a more expressive nose with your blend, Blake. I don't know if you guys noticed that at all as we've been going through these.
Mm-hmm.
I've been
Eric,
called a
did
more
you know-
expressive person before, so I get that. I could.
I think I called that out.
Yeah, I think the nose pulls through on Blake, but I feel like the palate really pops on that 90%. So I'll tell you what. But before we before we start cheerleading for one or the other, why don't we just send up a vote really quick and see where we're at, right? So 1 for Blake, 2 for Jordan, and then we'll see if we have a dominant winner on the count of 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Ooh, a tie. Ooh, wow, did not expect
I had
that.
Eric.
I didn't expect that at
I
all.
had Eric.
Wow.
All right. So
I
Mike
had Blake
and
going
Eric.
with Jordan's. Blake. You kept saying
I
Jordan,
like mine.
Jordan,
What can I
Jordan.
say? I picked it for a reason. I mean, I you know.
No, man, I will tell you, like and that's why I'm kind of ratcheting back and forth. I mean, there's definitely attributes of blending more of the other barrels into that 3A that give it some more dimension. That even as you pull away farther from it, you are getting some of that dimension with it that I noticed with my blends as well. And they're both great. I mean, they're both great barrels. They're both great blends.
To me, the addition of some wheat and more corn just kind of added it added fat on the cow, just a little more juiciness, a little more
fat on the cow.
You're ready to barbecue right now. Just to
I'll tell you what, so Eric, why did you go after my barrel? Why'd you pick the superior one?
Why did you pick the best barrel?
I honestly really like Blake's too. So it's
okay. So that sounds like a swing vote.
That sounds like a swing vote. No, I've been teeter-tottering the whole time. It was one of my finalists in my little round 3 of mine. So it's I already kind of liked it before going into this, and I knew I did, and I just wanted, if they're drinking both of them, it's powerful, and it'll let you know it's there. I mean, it'd be kind of corny, but it's.
I'll tell you what, Mike, Danny, you're not going to have a vote, but if you were to choose between the two, what one did you like and why?
I say just leave it up to them. Whatever you guys pick, you got to live with forever.
Oh, that's the end surprise. We'll tell you guys after we bottle it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
We'll tell you.
Yeah. You'll find out when you drink it.
I'll tell you. I mean, I think there's 2 things. I think they're both have different. I mean, I like them both. I think I really thought Jordan's was really interesting because philosophically, I believe in that there's like this notion of a single barrel blend where you can just almost add some spice and some pepper and some salt to and get some nuance to a single barrel. It's like giving it a little panache. And I really liked it. I thought I had a great flavor profile, and it really was loud from a spicy perspective. But then, then on Blake's, kind of like looking at the more business side of things, like I know that the yield from a bottle perspective is going to be low. I can, Danny and I know that most likely that 3A will probably yield the lowest. So if that's the highest blend, I mean, you're going to get a smaller yield. So with Blake's, I thought it had a great balanced flavor. And you're going to be able to yield a couple more bottles out of that because you're incorporating more of the other barrels. But, really, I liked them both. Very political answer.
Answer right there.
Well, I have to make more of Jordan's.
Because it was so good you drank it all?
Well, that's what I'm questioning right now. So I just made some of that up. Let me just look at it again. But there's something about Blake's. I'm big nose, right? I'm big on the nose. I think I get most of my thoughts based on the nose, and like kind of I go with my gut on the nose, and I'm getting like this. I'm getting something interesting on Blake's. I can't put my finger on it. It's a little earthy. Jordan's, like when I take it down, like the nose, I expect what's on the nose, and then I take it down and there's just these cherry notes that pop out that are delicious. Fucking corn. You know, so I don't know. I mean, can we talk about the nose? I know we're over an hour right now, but
are we going to end up in a coin flip? Is that what you're telling me?
yeah. I mean, I don't know. What are you guys gonna do?
I'll call heads. I got a 2-headed coin, so we'll flip that. And see what happens.
You know, I did. So, I mean, just a comment on the just tweaking the 3A a little bit. It did make a big difference to 3A. I'm still a little bit coming back to, I still like 3A on its own a lot. So when you just tweak 3A a little bit, I'm a little torn as to whether or not I like 3A on its own more than 3A with a little tweak. And so I'm almost like, is it tweaked enough? Have we added enough other dimension to this and other variances and nuances to it to make it worth, even like we were talking with that Buffalo Trace barrel, it's going to get watered down to, you know, their bottling proof. You know, have we done 3A a disservice by, you know, pulling it back a little bit, but being not as good? Or do we need to add in more dimension to really give it something different that it doesn't already have? And that's where I started to lean a little bit more towards that lower 3A portion, but still the backbone of it, to say, yeah, we've got some of the buttery notes, some of the caramel. It makes the nose a lot more expressive than it is on its own, or as the really super heavy 90% in the blend, where I'm getting that a little bit more with the pullback to where Blake is at the 50% than I am at the 90%. Again, both really good. It comes down to that, you know, what are we going for? And I think we're going, and not that we're going for, but I think we're seeing with Blake's mix that we've got a little bit more of we've got some more of these additional attributes from the other barrels coming into play. Some of that butterscotch, some of the caramel, some of the creaminess. We've enhanced the nose successfully. You know, we can say, I think without question, we've done that. You know, so I think you're seeing where you've done enough with the blending to say we've actually made the whole greater than the sum of the parts, in a sense.
I think that's well said. I mean, that's just me, but
Well, Eric, any last final thoughts before we choose a winner?
Man, I don't know. This is tough. I mean, I was partial to mine. I think Blake's closer to the mine than yours is. This is going to be a weird, you know, I keep thinking about this, and, you know, like yours is a little more like a stag, like characteristic wise, where Blake's is more like a promise of hope that, you know, Nick and I and you always talk about as being just a really great quintessential kind of even keeled kind of bourbon. So it just kind of, Blake's remind me more of that, and yours remind me of stag. So I mean, you're not always in the mood for a stag, right? Or sometimes we always are.
or maybe we are. I don't know.
40% of the time, I'm in the mood for a stag every time.
Yeah.
I'm always in the mood for a promise of hope. I'll tell you that. So
Yeah.
So I think for simplicity's sake, and to wrap this up, you know, why don't we go with Blake's blend, right? I think that'll just be easier. I think Nick's in love with it. Eric can go either way, so we'll do that just to wrap this up, so we're not spending 2 hours online debating for folks.
I mean, no, I think we just keep it going until we have a final resolution from Danny with we get Danny drunk enough going back and forth where he's forced. No, I mean, I'm happy to go either way. Obviously, I like my blend a lot. You know, I wouldn't have submitted it if I didn't. I think it brings in additional facts that it will have more bottles. I think people will be happy about that. But no, I mean, honestly, I could go either way, and not just saying that because, you know, mine's in the running, but I think they're both fantastic. And, you know, really all the blends were good. So
They were all good.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like, who thinks Jordan's blend enhanced 3A?
I don't know. I feel like I need to drink 3A on its own now.
Mhm.
I think it did. I think it enhanced it a little bit. Like I said, I just tried to add a little more meat to the backbone of of 3A.
I'll be honest. I really like Jordan's because I did like that 3A barrel, and I just thought there was just a subtle nuance that I found really appealing, that I just personally haven't really tasted too often. I mean, I thought yours was really, really good.
I appreciate you acknowledging we had that special blending touch, Mike.
So who got the job? Is it Jordan or me?
They were both awesome. I mean, they were both really good.
What did you like, Danny?
I already signed the contract, guys. Sorry, this was done before this.
Yeah.
I'd also like to point out, and so would John Henderson in the chats, that my Wi-Fi has not gone out one time on these things. I'm going to go ahead and say
knock on wood here, Blake.
It's the Pursuit guys that have the bad StreamYards that really messed up the internet. It's not me.
I have to go get my charger real quick because I'm at 2%.
No worries.
Jordan is like delaying it now. He's waiting for your Wi-Fi to go out, and then final vote. It's time.
I'm just wondering what Danny likes too.
What I like better?
What did you prefer between the two?
Okay,
I mean, Mike threw out his word.
Yeah, I think Jordan's.
Well, we can go with Blake if you guys want, but that's fine.
Blake,
Throwing it out there.
but I don't know. I would sit with this for a little longer, but I mean, for what you guys are going for, I think Jordan's represents something a little bit bigger about how just a little bit of change or influence can totally kind of revamp a barrel that you thought was great already, and then it gets even better.
Took it to an 11. Took it to
So
an
I think Mike asked that question then, right? As who thought that the small addition of the 5% of each of the other barrels enhanced 3A? Was that you who asked that question, Mike, before?
I asked that question.
Or you asked that question?
I was curious because I think someone said that they didn't think it did, and then I think other people thought that it did.
Gotcha. You asked that question. Yeah. Yep. So you think that it did? You believe that small addition enhanced what 3A offered as a starting point?
I do. Yeah.
How about you, Mike? What if your vote for?
He already threw out my barrel.
I 90% 3A.
Yeah, I thought it was just adding that additional, to me, I thought it was incredible. I mean, I literally finished 3A after we had our first session on Thursday night. On the next day, I finished the whole sample on its own. Danny had to send me samples so I could start, testing some of the blends that you guys had sent over. And I thought it was really incredible what just the tiniest influence of corn and wheat did to that rye barrel. I actually thought it made it a lot better. And I thought it was just, to me, I thought that was really interesting by just adding a small amount. Just I was picking up notes of wheat, and I'm very, we know that wheat, profile well, and I just thought it was different. That's why I liked it a lot. And I love you, Blake, and I love that blend, but I really did like it. I really did.
I'm not. I always want to be on the winning side. So, if I need to change my vote to be on that side, you let me know.
Last round. Does anyone want to vote for Jordan's blend one more time?
I mean, we could switch it. Let's switch it. I think Mike and Danny make good points. I think my blend's great. I think Jordan's blend is great, but
I think we can agree these were definitely better than the other two, Blake. No, Nick and Eric's were really good too.
Let's switch. I mean, what would we be looking at from a bottle perspective, do you think?
Well, I'm going to say before we say that, I'm going to just throw in there, I'm going to do a 99% 3A and 0.05.
Exactly. Nice.
Yeah. Probably about 40, between 40, 43 43 cases.
Okay.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
not like we're at
We're at 43 bottles.
100
Okay.
bottles or something.
No, we're using all of 3A, totally dumped, and we'll top off. We'll trim with the other 2 barrels.
Let's do that then. I think that's interesting. We call it the single barrel enhancement. I think that's good.
Yeah, a little.
I'm certainly okay with that. They were both good.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were.
They're definitely both good. Like I said before, going through all 4, it really comes down to what are we going for
Yeah.
with these,
All
So
right.
it sounds like
so
95
that
bucks.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That's exciting. And I think, Danny, in terms of the bottling, I know we've been lining it up. I mean, we're looking at, I think it's an end of July bottling run.
End of July, early August, yeah.
So we'll have, we'll get you guys all those details. And obviously, I mean, if we can travel, I think we're going to be definitely going. You guys are, more than welcome to come, depending on if you want to and the circumstance. So, next steps are let's go get this, bottled and blended, obviously.
Cool. This was actually this was super fun. So thanks so much for reaching out to us to do this, because this was a really good. I think this is a really good experience for all of us to have to learn. We've all done home blending before, but when you're actually just down to the nuanced a little bit of each barrel and you pick those single barrels yourself, that changes the whole game, right? That truly changed what it means to do a blend, I think, for all of us. And I can probably speak for all of us when I say that. So this was super interesting to do and just a really fun experience. So thanks so much. This was good.
No, this was great on our part too. I mean, this was great to go through it with you guys.
Yeah.
And I think even for us, we're trying to figure out, because we know, our identity as a company is we are out and find great bourbons, and Danny's turning out to be just an incredible blender, and he's very, very good at it in a short amount of time. And I think that's where we're slowly adapting to as a company. And I think going through this is our first time doing this, and I think there's a lot of good takeaways that we could probably use for the future in terms of curating things like this.
Yeah, and
one
there's
of those is to have an odd number of people making this selection.
Yeah.
So that you get
lessons for next time. Yeah.
So
I'm excited to have this bottle, in my house and drink it. So
yep.
Exactly.
So Blake, why don't you close us out? Why don't you tell people where they can buy this bottle, right, and what groups that's going to be sold through, and go from there.
Yeah. So these bottles will be going through the Breaking Bourbon Patreon group, as well as the Bourbonr Pro members initially. If some do make it past that, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. You may just want to join the groups to make sure. If they do, they'll be on Seelbach either way, and you can find them there. So we still have Penelope barrel strength and the Penelope the regular 80 proof version. So if you want to check it out, see what the kind of the benchmark is for Penelope, definitely go get a barrel or get a bottle there. But yeah, so probably mid-August or so, early August, we'll have these barrels up and move into the Patreon groups, and excited to get them in and to have them on the site and to taste them and to see what actually came in second place. So let's see.
Awesome. and Danny and Mike, why don't you just tell folks where they can normally find Penelope Bourbon?
Yeah, so right now we're distributed in a few states. Our home state in New Jersey, New York, Nebraska, Wisconsin, and starting to grow things out. We're going to be in. We just actually finalized. We're going to be going down to Georgia next, so we're launching in Georgia next month, which we're real excited about, and we're launching in Connecticut in July. And outside of that, we got Blake. He's been an early supporter of ours. I think Blake was our first online partner that we had, and it's been awesome working with Blake and the Seelbach team. And so yeah, looking forward to it. And thanks guys for having us. This was awesome.
Yeah, thank you. And Nick, why don't you wrap it up for Breaking Bourbon?
Yeah, so guys, thanks for tuning in and watching this. If you were on live, always fun. I mean, this experience from our part, we've done a lot of single barrels. We've blended for fun quite a bit, just, goofing around with infinity bottles and blending, to see what happens when you put a couple brands together. But I got to say, this experience of blending to get to that, this is going to actually be something we're going to put into a bottle, and, other people hopefully will want to drink it. Is a completely different experience and elevates that idea of doing a single barrel selection to a whole new level, that I think is just going to be a lot of fun going forward. So I'm excited to be part of this. Mike and Danny, appreciate you guys reaching out, and great get to know you guys better over the past month here or so. So yeah, definitely, check out, as Blake mentioned, where you can buy these. This is really exciting. This process is really fun. I know we went back and forth a little bit on, what our favorites were, but at the end of the day, I think they were all really good. So whatever you're going to get out of this is going to be fantastic. So thanks, guys, for tuning in, and have a good night.
Awesome. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Yep,
Cheers.
Thanks.